Now that Drew has officially left the island, it does beg the question, what next? Well, according to a lot of you, you would like to see a next, which is great, because so do I. I feel like there is a lot of potential down here, and I think we've only really just scratched the surface. However, Drew Island has a few problems, and probably out of all of them, traffic would be the worst. It is affecting pretty much everything. Services, happiness, pollution, maybe the lack of public transport isn't helping, and I'm sure we could use a couple of extra parks, maybe even flesh out the industry a little bit more. We do have a lot of demand, but you know what? Today, I think that we should focus on fixing none of it. Yeah. Instead, I'm going to be fixing a little bit of a non-problem. At least this only really affects me, and that is to do with the scale. I would like to see a little bit more expansion to Drew Island, an area of the island that is a bit more permanent, because everything else down here is pretty much on the chopping block. And I'm in the mood to do a little bit of detailing, as well as checking out some of the buildings and assets as part of the US packs that I haven't really played around with yet. I'm keen to build a particular neighborhood which I reckon is going to be probably one of my most unique and interesting neighborhoods. But first, a time-lapse. I figured a good starting place would be an expansion of Garbage Island. This is a very underwhelming, very under-detailed, and just needed a whole lot of love. Especially because this is the default angle I look at the city. I always feel like there is a default angle you always kind of go back to look at your cities, and this is mine, and the very first thing that you see is Garbage Island. We needed something a whole lot better down here. So by the end of this time lapse, there's actually going to be an entire neighborhood down to here that'll be on the beach, all sheltered by a nice little break wall and a park. Quite a lot of detail, in fact. I really go detail heavy, which was a lot of fun. And then we'll also have a bit of a port, which I'm going to be working on in just a couple of seconds. And as I work on that port, I would like to talk about a different build. I would like to talk about a different city. In fact, let's talk about New Donlan. Yes, New Donlan. For those of you who don't know, this was a US East Coast city that I started about this time last year. And I put a bit of a pin in it when the European packs started to come out, and I was feeling really inspired to work on some European cities, and that was a lot of fun. Donlan has been awesome, and I am keen to go back to it when I am feeling inspired again to go back to some more European builds. But at the moment, I am pretty keen to do some US cities, and I was really keen to get back into New Donlan when Paradox Interactive reached out for the sponsorship. And I was fortunate enough to get early access. I thought, great, this is my opportunity to go back and redevelop Manhattan. That was always a plan. But unfortunately, because it was early access, a lot of the mods that I used for New Donlan weren't compatible. So I actually just wasn't even able to open up the save at all. And that was a bit of a shame, because that would have been a pretty seamless video to make. And I think a lot of people expected it. But of course, I did Drew Island instead. This was a video idea that I've had for ages, but just kept on pushing it back. And I thought that this was a good opportunity to kind of merge the two, the feature video and then Drew Island. I can actually finally do it. So Drew Island was actually just meant to be a standalone video, and then once mods were updated, I would go back to New Donlan and continue that one. However, as I continued to work in Drew Island, I had a couple of realizations, and I'm going to share them with you guys. And at the moment, I am leaning towards Drew Island being part of my regular schedule, releasing regular videos for that series rather than New Donlan. And I've got two main reasons why. One reason is New Donlan is far too big. The scale of it is enormous, is by far the biggest city that I've ever built, and there's good reason why I don't usually build cities of that size, and it's because I like to detail and really think about where things are going. And unfortunately, it's not really achievable when you build cities that are enormous, and New Donlan has kind of become enormous, and all the areas that I am most excited to build, like Brooklyn, the Bronx, Coney Island, even Manhattan, there's areas that I just don't think I'll ever get to because it's just too big. And I reckon that Drew Island is more in line with the scale of a city that I much prefer. And I'd like to kind of embed those things within this city instead. I think that'll be more interesting. And I guess that leads me to the main reason why I am leaning more towards Drew Island. The thing that bothers me the most is the fact that I have essentially just rebuilt New York. and that was okay for a little while. That was okay for half a year, but going back into that after building in Drew Island, it makes me realize I don't have as much creative freedom, because building in Drew Island, it's really fun just going, maybe I'll do this here, maybe I'll do that there. I can just do whatever I like. Whereas when I'm building in New Donlan, I do feel like I've trapped myself in a bubble of, you have to pretty much just replicate what's happening in New York. And there are a bunch of other reasons, which I'll go into in the live play at the very end of the video. We'll fly around New Donlan and have a little look around. But I am also weighing up the pros and cons for both series. It is not a landslide. I reckon New Donlan has a lot of pros for it. I really like the fact, well, part of me actually likes the fact that it is just giant. I've never built anything quite as large as that. I'm kind of curious to see what happens when we add more people to the city. Plus, I do like New Donlan. I wouldn't mind continuing it, but I just have to completely change the way that I build that city. Just put it out there. Do we continue New Donlan in the background? Do I just upload it to Paradox Mods and let you guys have a go at it? But I guess I am leaning towards Drew Island. I have more freedom. I feel like it's more manageable and I can actually detail. Whereas I don't think I can do that in New Donlan. It's just too large. But I guess I'll explain that a little bit better in more detail at the end of the video. In terms of what I've been up to, I have just been working on this port, keeping it fairly mild in terms of detail, but there is a little bit of detail down here. And I really think that it pretty much is all in the road. I always love these one-way roads going in, and then they get nice and wide where freight is unloaded and then reloaded up again. At least that's what I assume is going on down here. And then a whole bunch of offices and other little bits of industry and just some decals. But I do think that what is really making these are just the patches of different types of concrete. And, just changing up the ground color, I think adds so much to the atmosphere of these places. And I actually think it looks pretty good when you look at it compared to the rest of the city. But of course, we did need to connect him up, and we do have this bridge, which I needed to figure out how this is going to interact with this whole area a whole lot better. And this is the general idea for the path of the highway, but I do need some sort of interchange here at some point. At the moment, I've got nothing, but I think we're definitely going to need it, just because we are going to have a bit of density around here as well as some industry. So I think that in terms of making it so that they actually get good highway access and actually fixing some of those problems that I did mention at the beginning of the video, yeah, we do need something. But for now, I just want to keep him pretty simple because I wanted to more focus on this neighborhood that we're going to be building. So this whole area, I know that some people actually mentioned this in the Drew Island video that I released a couple of weeks ago, is that the general layout of Drew Island is pretty similar to Boston. Yeah, kind of crazy that some people figured that out, because I feel like it's not that similar, but maybe just a little tiny bit. But congrats if you did figure that out. Yeah, this was kind of inspired by Boston in terms of the general layout of some areas, but I will be taking more inspiration in the future from certain areas. In particular, this build. This build is going to be pretty much taken from Boston, South Boston, City Point. I think you can see the similarities. Actually, it's going to be very, very similar. And what I like is that this will be a nice little snapshot of what South Boston is like, at least City Point and South Boston and this port and all this sort of area. But then the surrounding parts are going to be completely different. You know, this bridge is so different to anything else that's in Boston. But I like the idea of those little snapshots of neighborhoods and cities, and then you kind of stitch them all together and see what the city ends up looking like in the end. But I actually had no idea about City Point until doing this build. No idea in the slightest. And then actually kind of forming a real appreciation for this area. It just looks really nice. All these really nice old buildings and this beach out the front. And I also like the port being so close too. Always like those contrasts between industry and nice neighborhoods. And I was actually going to originally make this whole place industrial and even make this neighborhood a bit more run down with like vacant lots and all that. But I think that this works a little bit better. So that's the inspiration I'll be taking for this area. And I'm a pretty big fan of the road layout of this area, of this neighborhood, because it does feel kind of secluded from the rest of Garbage Island. You just have a couple of main roads that are leading into it, but then for the most part, it is kind of secluded, and I really like that. It's a very much isolated little neighborhood that you could make the argument that it could potentially just be its own separate town, but I guess we'll just have to wait and see how the rest of it does end up forming. By the way, we can't keep on calling it Garbage Island, can we? I think that this is probably a discussion for maybe another video when more people are watching, you know, not just in the middle of a time lapse, but I think that we do need to probably rename a lot of the islands and places within Drew Island. I think that a nice nod to some of the original names, you know, like Drew has to be there somewhere, but I haven't really set myself up here for some good sounding names. Tipsville? Garbo? I don't know. What do you guys reckon? Whatever this island ends up being called, we call this neighborhood something completely different. Something nice sounding, but I'll leave that to you guys. We'll name that in the next video. But right now what I'm doing is I'm working on all this parking that is gonna be alongside this little beach. I wanted this to be a pretty substantial amount of parking. We're gonna be having, I think, some sort of tourist trap that's gonna be sitting up on the headland. So I did need some sort of parking to be up there. At the moment, it's just gonna be just a generic park, but I didn't want to drag out a generic path. I felt like we had enough concrete and enough pavement. Instead, I wanted to go for this red path. I really like this. I feel like this is a nice splash of different color that we definitely needed within this area. So that's what I'm dragging around here, and I'm hoping that people use this. I'm pretty sure that's the whole point of these paths, is that people can actually walk along them, but we'll have to test that out in the live play because I actually don't know at this stage. But I did want this to stretch around this whole little parkland, just as like a bit of a theme for this this whole little park. I feel like this is turning out pretty nice. Now that I've created the beach, I also wanted to create a break wall just whereabouts this parking lot is, and I thought that it might be a nice little nod to our little headlands that we had where Drew Island is, you know, where all it started, that mysterious head over on the other side of the bay. Yeah, so we're going to be using a giant stone head as this break wall. So if you know, you know. I'm continuing the break wall a little bit along the beach and just kind of mixing in some little bushes, and what I really like is kind of mixing in some of the different surfaces. I'm now using some Sully beach network areas. I think they're just called areas. But I really like mixing in the different levels of sand as it starts to mix in with the other grass that's around here, and trying to imagine where people might be walking around and creating their own little pathways as they walk down to this beach, which I have to admit, I don't think there's going to be a huge amount of people using this beach. Like, as nice as this whole neighborhood and kind of beachside park is going to be, I can't really imagine it'd be the nicest beach to swim in. It is probably a little polluted, but we'll have to sprinkle in a couple of guys a little later on. I'm now adding in this break wall, which is going to be a bit of an odd one. You know, I wouldn't have created a break wall that looks like this if I didn't see it within Boston and thought, okay, well, that does exist. We will do this little pointy, I don't know, like a little pointy park. It's kind of strange, but it's pretty cool. It's the sort of thing that if I was to build it and just was to say, oh yeah, this is just like some random thing that I'm making up, I think a lot of people would say, no, this doesn't exist. Break walls don't look like that. But I think sometimes when you take inspiration from real life places, you do end up building weirder and quirkier things, because I guess in my mind, it would have been like, no, that would just be weird. Break walls don't do that. I would have said the same thing, but hey, turns out they do. And I think by taking inspiration from this, it's made for a more interesting build. Including this little channel thing here, which I think turned out pretty great. It actually adds so much to this whole break wall, and definitely wouldn't have come up with this by myself, which I really wish I could show the rest of this build. In fact, the rest of the entire of this time-lapse build. But my recording software does this really funny thing sometimes where I think I'm recording stuff, but really I'm just recording a black screen. And as it turns out, that was for like 5 hours worth of build. So instead of me showing you in a time lapse, I'm going to show you in a live play. So let's do that. Well, I reckon that has definitely improved the perspective of the city. And not just from this angle. Like, I've just been flying around and I am feeling really happy just having something that feels very much complete. In saying that, There are a couple of things that I still want to do. It's still not completely complete, but at least compared to everywhere else, which is, like I said before, very much on the chopping block. But first, we do have some building to do, and we also have some exploring to do, because I have built quite a lot. Just quickly though, you can probably tell that I am not rocking the newest patch. Unfortunately, I have played it, but it's not totally compatible with some of the mods that I have. So I do have to wait for my mods to get updated, and then I reckon it'll be all peachy and ready to go. So we'll have to dive into that new patch in a few days, at least when I record the next episode. But anyway, let's have a look at some of the things I've been building. And it's such a shame that I wasn't able to show you all this, because I feel like this was the best part, actually seeing it come together. And my favorite part was probably this park that I did end up creating down here, and I've used a couple of different custom assets for this. I'm really in love with this baseball pitch, which was created by Sully, and oh man, it's just so nice. And I feel like this is the sort of thing we definitely needed within a build like this, just because it adds so much color and variation, and it's just so recognizable. You know, you just go like, okay, that's where people play baseball. And he is a little bit on the smaller side of things, and probably a little bit risky when it comes to knocking balls into the port, but it is what it is. I couldn't really pass up that opportunity. It fits in so perfectly, so I had to do it. And I do think it's a pretty good fit. When I was going through and placing down these buildings, I was just thinking about the type of vibe and feeling that I wanted for a neighborhood like this. And I decided to lean into these colored row houses, which I feel like are going to be iconic to this neighborhood. I am a big fan of these. Of course, they are just awesome looking buildings. And the really great thing about row houses is that they are pretty much all identical. What I love about this as well is that there are some other buildings that are pretty similar, but then also a nice little variation. So we do have these guys and then these guys on the other side, and I really like that. And then I'm just going to use this picker, and I can select this guy, and I don't really want him connecting to that road. I want him to be, yeah, that one. Great. Like that. And I love that they change color immediately, and that is looking pretty good. Although, of course, they are not totally in line or even positioned super accurately. Like, I reckon we could even squeeze in one more building there. And I'm even going to do the same treatment with this row, and I think I might even be able to find a corner shop just to sit in. I might get rid of this guy too. Maybe like a little corner shop that could sit right here, just because this does feel like a sort of important little spot. I reckon a nice little cafe could sit just in that little corner. Wow, look at that guy. Whoa, that is such a nice looking building, but probably not appropriate right there. Instead, I think I'm gonna place him. This is like my town center for this little neighborhood, whatever we end up calling it. And I reckon that he fits in pretty well, maybe even to a little corner like this. Because I do feel like we need a little bit of extra density, so I will add a bit of density around here, but I haven't chosen a building yet, have I? Oh, I think this is it. I mean, that is a motel. It's vanilla. You know, it's the vanilla asset, but I think that might work for me. I think that's what I kind of wanted. I mean, this little area is pretty much just slapped down in a couple of minutes. I haven't done a huge amount, so it'd be nice to just kind of add in a little bit more detail and effort. And just think about where certain buildings are going to sit. Like, I can already tell that this little hotel, which is a nice little nod to the other one that we have, the other one being a little bit more grand, but I reckon this could, not exactly there, maybe more like this, so that it is just a, oh, that's quite lovely. Although, if we're trying to make a nice first impression, we could probably do a little bit more with this road. I am choosing to do this way because I actually prefer having trees that are not perfectly positioned. I like to be able to choose where they sit, and I reckon it looks a bit nicer when it's a bit more full of leaf coverage. In fact, I think I might even make this whole area just a little bit nicer in terms of the types of trees around here and also the types of commercial buildings that we have. Alright, not much, just a couple apartments and a little back alley and a couple of extra trees. I feel like is all we really needed just for that little strip, but I actually want to move on to this hill over here because I am inspired by this high school that sits in City Point that is actually pretty interesting. Like, this is a nice little ovally shaped road that surrounds this high school, and I reckon we could probably pull off something sort of similar. We do have a similar mound, which I did plan to do something kind of similar. Oh, I reckon this French police station could do the trick. What I'm gonna do is I might place him first, and maybe we can have a bit of an avenue to start him off, and then we will get a one-way road and we'll stretch that all the way around him. This is gonna look a little bit strange. How'd it go? Pretty good, I reckon. Maybe not. What I am gonna do is I'm going to just use Move It. I feel like that is the easier option, at least for me. Just stretch out those nodes and we can worry about the height in a moment using Move It again, because at the moment it's a little all over the place. I think I'm pretty happy with where all this is going to sit. I'm going to smooth out some of this, but then I actually might make a bit of a mound. So like a nice little hill just behind. And what I want is a bit of a monument back here. And I might even try and use one of these. Maybe this, but I think that's going to be too large, isn't it? No. It's too big. But it's almost perfect. If it was half the size, that would be the perfect thing to sit there. I'll just have to keep on thinking about what I could place. In the meantime, I'm going to drag out some paths. Pretty just okay, but then also not. All right, fine. Come on, Move It. Save the day. Still not super perfect, but you know I'm not a super perfect kind of guy. I like a bit of imperfection, but what I've essentially done is I've just grabbed the nodes and just made it so that they were aligned on either side so that it is somewhat symmetrical. And geez, I'm using somewhat in a very loose way. But I might just drop these guys a little bit so that it does look like it is kind of all pointing up to that one little spot. Sully has created one of my all-time favorite grasses. This is like a subtle addition. You know, it's only just a slight variation to our normal grass color, because I actually think it adds a lot to your builds, you know, like just making it so that you can tell that that is a manicured grass and this one is a little bit more wild, but then also not too wild. I really like that. I feel like the subtleness is a real game changer. And then the real winner is mixing in some of these, just like a couple of little bits of imperfections where the grass is just a little bit more worn out. So I'm gonna try and figure out where maybe like people have been walking around or hanging out and just like messing up the grass a little bit. I reckon around here, people would just be, you know, having little picnics. Maybe even just taking a little sneaky detour through here. Just like, oh, I might just save a little bit of time and walk up this way. You know what? They've walked all the way up from the road and made just a little dirt track. All you cheeky guys. Yeah, I reckon that's enough. I still cannot figure out what I'm going to put there. If you've got any ideas, some sort of like statue or monument would be nice, but I just don't have anything that is the right size. I am so disappointed that wouldn't work. Maybe this could work, but I also think that it's just not really quite what I'm after. This? Nah, okay. I don't know. If you've got any ideas, let me know. But I feel like that is a nice little spot. And just like a totally different type of area to the rest of all of this. But you know what? I do need to blend it in. I do need to add in some houses. And I reckon that these guys are going to be the perfect fit. Well, I reckon that neighborhood is pretty much complete. I do think, though, we need to figure out, obviously, we need to figure out what is going to be around these roads that I have dragged out. Is it going to be more neighborhoods, or is this going to be a bit of commercial, or are we going to start getting into some of these larger flats? I'm trying to figure that out. It has definitely turned into a pretty nice neighborhood. Like, this is maybe one of the nicest neighborhoods within Drew Island, and I reckon it's probably going to stay like that. If anything, we're going to lean more into it and maybe even zone out maybe some larger buildings. I do know I have a couple of mansions that I could be placing down. Like, I am very tempted to place a mansion and just take one of those little spaces that we have right there. You know, those 4 buildings, we could replace that with one of the nice signature mansions instead. So just thinking about it, still trying to figure it out. But all around here, what do you think we end up adding? You know, I feel like we do have a lot of parking, so we could continue that beach and add in some umbrellas just to show that people are using it. And we could add some shops or some other bits and pieces. But I do feel like we need to kind of show the end of this neighborhood and then lean into something completely different around the other side of this road. And all this land could in fact just go all up this way, and we could add a whole bunch of extra residential areas, or even we could just continue that and have this highway stretch across the waterway as well. So just some ideas, let me know. Oh, I should probably turn this guy on, and actually I should probably connect him up as well. So hopefully he doesn't produce too much pollution and actually just tank the land value of this neighborhood. But well, I guess we'll just have to wait and see what happens with all of that. But I do feel like it is turning out pretty nice. Obviously, a couple of extra little bits of detail we could add. Okay. You know what we need to do now? We should dive into New Donlan. And let's have a little chat and fly around and have a think about what that could look like in the future. And we're back in New Donlan. Geez, what is going on with this haziness? It is looking very foggy, maybe polluted. Whatever it is adding to, I guess, the atmosphere of it all. It is a big place, definitely compared to Drew Island, which I feel like is a very, very scaled down version of a city. This is looking more like a giant city. And in reality, I've only just kind of scratched the surface, because as you can see, we have started Manhattan, and I was starting to get a good sense of where things were going, but I think that up here really puts things into perspective. You can see that Manhattan isn't even halfway complete, and I had planned to redevelop all of the areas that I had already somewhat completed. So all of this would be pretty much rezoned out with all the new assets that we had. I also have all around here, which was the Bronx, an area that I was looking forward to probably the most out of all of it. But who knows when I'd get to an area like this. Then we also got Brooklyn and Coney Island, another area that I was really looking forward to, and Staten Island and Jersey City. It's a little large. I think I very much underestimated how much space that I had, and really just figuring out the game at that point when I first made the map and started to plan where things were going to be. I just thought that this was a good scale to work at, but as you can see, maybe a little bit too big. And I guess if I did continue the series, I probably would just change the way that I was developing each area. rather than spending hours just thinking about each block and dragging out roads carefully and detailing. I would just be a little bit more willy-nilly with all the roads and absolutely no detail. And that could be quite fun because then we would spend more time maybe on infrastructure and public transport and just managing the sheer amount of people that would be inhabiting all the cities, because that's the other thing, it's multiple cities within this series. However, the other problem that I think we will face is that at some point we will hit a limit where our frame rate, our performance, our simulation speed is going to tank and we won't really be able to continue any further. I'm pretty sure around 400,000, that is when you really starts to notice a much slower simulation speed. I was watching the Tmeister just the other day and that was pretty much the limit for his pretty massive rig. And I am rocking a pretty good rig too, but I reckon every computer has its limits, and I reckon we could hit 400,000 pretty soon, to be honest. Now, I just want to show you something because I don't know if you remember, but about 4 months ago, I was having some computer issues. My editing computer did die on me, and I had it in for repairs, but unfortunately, it was not able to be repaired, and I did lose an entire episode. So what you are looking at right here is an episode that I did have, but unfortunately got lost to that computer, and that's a real shame because I actually really enjoyed that episode, and I feel like there is some really fun things down here. Looks like a couple of assets did not load in, but I did spend a lot of time working on all this network. I'm pretty sure all this metro is new. Yeah, it is actually. I just squeezed this custom depot in, and it actually looks pretty good in this little spot with this retaining wall and this station as well. I'm pretty sure you guys saw me do this. I can't actually remember, it's been so long, but I also created this custom plaza and all that stuff and totally redeveloped this whole area of the city, and I do feel like this turned out pretty nice. But geez, can you imagine what we can do with all the new custom assets? And then all this light rail is new, and I built it on all this old train line that used to snake through here, so that was a lot of fun to build. And then this metro line that goes all the way through here, and this custom station. Oh geez, that was such a good episode. I literally had it all finished, and it was rendered, and I was just sitting on that computer waiting to be uploaded, and I lost it, and it's such a shame because it just made that whole computer issue just way more painful. You know, just flying around makes me want to work on it and continue it, but then just knowing the sheer scale of everything and how much work we'd have to do, obviously we wouldn't be able to detail and work on places quite like we did for New Dimesburg, but it could be fun just to, you know, be a bit more willy-nilly with roads, and perhaps New Dimesburg is just the detailed side of everything, and everything else is just under-detailed and a bit more randomly placed, and we just kind of work on the infrastructure and stuff. But look, I'm gonna leave it there. Thank you all so much for watching today's episode. It is very much appreciated. And to everyone who watched the very first Dry Island video, thank you, because that's doing really well, that video. I'm really glad because I spent ages working on it, as you can probably tell. So it's nice to get lots of feedback and for people to be keen for me to continue this city, because I'm pretty keen too. So I think you can probably tell that. But I do want to give a special shout outs to my beloved patrons and YouTube members for making videos like this possible. Adam Jack, Antoine Compo, Owen Bomber, Mr. Speed, M. Mark, Oscar, Aiden H, Dexter Batts, Kevin Thompson, Brendan Kelly, Bobby LA, and Leo Horton. Cheers guys, catch you all on the next one.